So, we start a new sermon series. As we move into the school season, people are going through transition, teachers are back in school, kids are getting ready to go back in school. I had the wonderful privilege last night of being the speaker at the FCA kickoff event for Central Mississippi's Fellowship of Christian Athletes, right? And so that was wonderful to see our high school students from all over Central Mississippi gathered together to worship together and to hear a sermon before they go back to school. And so as we transition then into the fall, the Lord led me to go to the book of Exodus for our sermon series. And you'll notice that the subtitle for the sermon series is, what is it? The Way Out. And you know, if you're familiar with the story as we find it in the book of Exodus, it's that very famous and very important story of God bringing the people of Israel out of a place where they were stuck for 400 years. They were stuck, right? They were stuck. Ever been stuck? There was nothing they could do to get themselves out of there. And God intervened, and he stepped in, and he pulls them out. What's the main character of the book of Exodus? What's his name? His name is Moses. And that's a little odd because it's an Egyptian name, right? And he's Jewish. Why does he have an Egyptian name? If you remember, the princess of Egypt pulled him up out of the water. And that's one of the major themes in the book of Exodus, because as we track the story of the Israelites, as they move out of Exodus, God is going to pull them, not just out of Exodus, he's going to pull them up out of the Red Sea, the baptism of God's people. And this, of course, is a elaborate, true story, yet at the same time object lesson for us in our sin and in our circumstances. There's nothing we can do. You can't pull yourselves up by the bootstraps out of your sin. They're stuck. But God provides for them a way out. Now, what I find interesting is I'm 41, right? That's a pretty good age, right? I'm starting to feel the aches and the pains and had the shoulder surgery and the headaches, and it's coming. And you're going, it ain't nothing yet. You just wait, you spring chicken boy, you still got your eyesight and your hearing, if you can hear me right now. We're going through these seasons of life. Have you ever felt like that your life dictates you rather than you dictating your life? I call it tail wag dog syndrome, where it's like, how did I get into this situation in which I'm kind of stuck? I've got to go over here and drop the kids off. I've got to go over here, visit this person in the hospital. I've got to go over here to prepare for the message. I've got to go over here to have a meeting about the youth. And all of a sudden, what happens? I got to go to the post office, got to go to the grocery store, and the day's gone. When we had young kids years ago, someone said, it goes fast, right? How many agree? Yeah, it goes fast. And they said, but it's weird because the years feel really short, but the days feel really long when the kids are young. So it feels long, but it's short. But what oftentimes happens is we get stuck. Not just in like that sin or that, we get stuck. And next thing you know, 20 years went by of being stuck, right? I was doing some research in preparation for today, and I suspected this was the case, but I realized it is, in fact, the case. You know we have a serious anxiety and depression epidemic in our culture today? I suspected it. But it's not just a suspicion, it's real. We have a serious anxiety and depression problem in America. And this is really interesting to me in a lot of ways. Having lived where I lived in Haiti, where people are living off of like $700 a year, but nobody's killing themselves. Forgive me for a sensitive topic. And here we are, living off an average $70,000 a year, and the rates just keep going up. It's like, I think we're stuck. I think we're a little stuck. And I think there's a general sentiment in our culture and in our society that our lives often dictate us. And I think that this book, and I hope that this series will give us some ideas, some truth, solutions to getting unstuck. Jesus died so that we could be set free. Yet how many of us actually live in that freedom? Every day, I call them takers. There are takers. There are situations, people, and circumstances that always want to take our joy and take our peace and take our discipline. The takers are everywhere. I'm so grateful that when we wake up, God's mercies are renewed every day, and we feel, if you're anything like me, refreshed, ready to go, early morning, let's get that cup of coffee, let's have those devotions, let's rock and roll, and then the road's closed and I'm going to be 10 minutes late. Taker. St. Augustine, you know what I'm talking about, right? Taker, taking it, just taking it. There are takers everywhere, right? So I'm hoping as we move into this sermon series, beginning with this week's text, you might be going, what does a genealogy have to say to us? I'm hoping that at the end of this 7-week series, we can find a way out. We can find a way out. So that by the time we come, and this is crazy to even think about, by the time we come to Advent, right, pastor's brain's already thinking about Advent, that it can be a mighty celebration, right, as we prepare for his coming, that we can be free from distraction and we can focus our attention on the arrival of the King. So that's sort of where we're headed. If you have your Bibles and the time remaining, would you turn with me to Exodus chapter 1? Exodus chapter 1. To revisit, what we have is a list of names. Ready? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And then Joseph was already in Egypt. Well, what does that have to tell us? If you are to jump forward, we can only read so many verses on a Sunday morning, and you were to read the rest of this chapter, I'm sure you know what happens. The people of Israel are multiplying like crazy. They are filling Egypt. There's so many of them that Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, begins to become afraid. You know, the people of God are supposed to strike fear in the hearts of those who are against his church. We're a mighty force, y'all. Pharaoh goes, oh man, God's people are getting too big. God's people are getting too powerful. They're disrupting things for me. And so he's so concerned that he puts out this decree, kill all the firstborns. Whoa. So we have this list of names, and we have this situation where God's people are multiplying so quickly that it's absolutely out of control. Pause with me for a minute. What book comes before Exodus? Genesis. All right, let me say something real quick, y'all, about the Bible. You know, the Bible is really important for the people of God because it's God's self-revelation. That's where we find his will. That's where we find direction. And we've got to teach the Bible to our young people. I was at this FCA event last night, and there's a lot, and they were the great vibe. The kids don't know their Bibles. And I was thinking, oh man, I'm so glad God brought me to Mississippi. People ask me, you're from New Jersey, what do you think of Mississippi? I love Mississippi, especially the people, and I love the food. The heat, getting used to that sort of thing. But I love Mississippi. And what we know about it from the north is, what do we call it? The what belt? There's churches everywhere. I thought, man, everybody's going to, and I think things are shifting a little bit. I was really surprised that the young people didn't really know their Bibles at all. Everybody, hey, turn to the book of, here's the test of how well someone knows their, Zephaniah. Table of contents. Genesis. I encourage you, if you're a grandparent, if you're an aunt, if you're an uncle, if you're a parent, encourage your kids to know their Bibles. Encourage your kids to know their Bibles. All right, Genesis. We've got the situation where the coffers are overflowing with the children of Israel. But in the book of Genesis, isn't it ironic that the big recurring problem in Genesis is we can't have kids? You catch that? Abraham, Sarah, 90 years old. You're going to have a kid. Miraculous birth of Isaac. And so much of that Abraham story is them waiting on God to deliver on his promise. Can't have kids. And then Isaac gets married. Bible trivia, who's Isaac's wife? Starts with an R and ends with Rebecca. Very good. See, Wellspring knows their Bibles, Rebecca. And then she's infertile. And then they have kids, Jacob and Esau. Jacob marries, it's kind of complicated. He wants to marry Rachel, but his father-in-law tricks him and he ends up marrying Leah. But Rachel's the preferred wife, and she can't have kids. All in the story of Genesis, the problem is reproduction. And that's where the battle is fought. Lord, when are you going to answer this prayer? And then you turn the page over into the book of Exodus, and now we're having too many kids. What is the Bible telling us? What is this trying to say? Problems after problems after problems after problems. How many people here can say in your life experience, once that problem went away in the 40s, there were no more? Nope. I remember saying to my friend when we first had Lily, our firstborn, when do you stop worrying about your kids? He said, never. And I was, okay. And he said, in fact, the worry increases the older that they get. Now, I don't know if that's your experience, but that was his experience. And here's the interesting thing. As a church, we're growing. We're growing. And that has caused problems. And once we solve this problem, there's going to be another problem. Now, I'm talking about what we call in Haiti, Monde et Monde, which is mountains beyond mountains. You get over one mountain, you get to the bottom, and you find there's another one standing in front of you. And is this not true that life just keeps kicking our butts and never stops until it's over? Many of you I've met with in my office, and you're going, we had these plans, but it got disrupted by this, and then once we got over this, this happened, and then we got over this, and then that happened. We're stuck. It's just one thing after another. I was talking to a guy this week from the church, and all my foundation's having problems. Got to get the foundations fixed. You get the foundation fixed, what happens? You're going to have to get your drywall fixed. You're going to get the drywall fixed. You're going to get the brick fixed on the outside. And then he said, and then my refrigerator stopped working. It's like, man, we got to go and cast the demons out of that house. But isn't that how life is? The people of Israel. Now, here's what's interesting. God delivers them through the plagues. We're going to look at those stories. Finally, oh man, they've been waiting 400 years for this. The plagues come. Oh, God's got a plan. Here's Moses. The sun went dark. The locusts came. The Nile filled with blood. The firstborn. And Pharaoh finally says, all right, you can go. And they go marching out of there. And what do they come to? Well, before the wilderness, they come to the Red Sea. What? I thought that was it. And God says this, be still. Be still. I'm going to take care of this. These individuals, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, so on and so forth. You know they don't all have the same mothers, right? 4 different moms. Rachel, Leah, and 2 concubines. That's a pretty messed up family right there. Four moms over the course of them. They inherited this situation. They inherited this. Not just the situation of this dysfunctional family. And think about what grandpa did to dad. Laban, how he treated Jacob. Yeah, you can take Rachel, gets him drunk and switches it on him. Can you imagine walking around with that story as a part of your legacy? Not only did they have to inherit the dysfunction of their family and all the mess that comes with that, the brothers tried to kill Joseph, decided to sell. This is a mess of a family, but and add to it, now they're slaves in Egypt, and they've inherited this situation. And we as individuals today, we inherit these situations, and we feel like we can do nothing about them. Mom was this, dad was this, I was treated this way, they were treated that way, and here I am, what am I supposed to do? And God reaches in and says, I'm going to change your heritage. We're going to get you unstuck. We're going to get you unstuck. And so, this story reminds us, remember that God knows all this is going on and he's got a plan. He's got a plan working over here. He's got the Moses plan and he's got the Jesus plan. That when we feel stuck in our sin, when we feel stuck in our circumstances, in things that we've inherited, we didn't have any contribution to it, things are a mess. I almost want to ask, who here feels stuck? When is this situation ever going to change? I remember being with a guy who's been in my life for 25 years, and I hadn't seen him for about 15, and I was hoping the guy would change, because he was a mess. And I saw him again, and my immediate thought was, he hasn't changed one bit. And here's the posture, it's never going to change. And not only that, the relationships, the financial situation. Finally got that car paid off, and guess what? It just blew its transmission. This is never going to change. Or we look at society. It's never going to change. God tells us through the story of Exodus, don't think like that. Don't think like that. You're not stuck. He's got a plan. Things can change, and they will change if you submit to him. He's going to, the interesting thing, to get them unstuck, he doesn't send them money. And we live like money's the solution, don't we? If I could just have a little bit more. He doesn't send them money. He doesn't send them, to get them unstuck, he sends them a person. He sends them Moses. And to get us unstuck, he sends us a poor carpenter from Nazareth. I can't stand up here and promise you guys that one health problem won't lead to another, that leads to more financial stress, that leads to more anxiety in our lives, that leads to more stressful relationships, that leads to problem, mountain after mountain, problem after problem after problem. In fact, here's what I can promise you. Jesus wants to move right into the middle of it and take up residence there with you in the midst of it. And he wants to walk with you through it. He wants to be there. right in the center of those problems and be the king. The Bible says, consider your trials a joy. That's such a familiar verse. But you know what? I don't think we do it very good. I don't. At least I don't. I moan and groan when I have trials and problems. He says, no, it's a good thing because that difficulty God's going to use it to bring redemption to you and to your circumstances. He's going to take up residence in our midst. Now, one of the ways in which we acknowledge that Jesus is living in our midst, his presence is with us, and this is weird, is by eating together. Right? That's how we do it. God saved us. He redeemed us. Let's eat. Let's eat. Because it's a sign of reconciliation. It's a sign of peace between us and God. It's a sign of unity. As we stand up here and we welcome new members and we read this thing, it's a sign that we're not in this alone. We are together. I am with you. John Wesley was on his deathbed. You all know who John Wesley is? And he had famous last words before he breathed his last. He was very, very sick. And out of nowhere, before he gave up his spirit, he sat up in his bed and said, the best of all, God is with us.